Hey there nation, welcome to the show where we help you to play miniatures wargaming on a budget. It is I, Commander CheapSkate, and we are back with another edition of the Underhive Wars. This is a series of battle reports that is dedicated to our Necromunda Dominion campaign, and this is battle report number 7. It is fought between my two friends, Warlord Ace with his gang 911 from House Van Saar, versus my other friend Brother Grimm with the Pelago-Slam Kings of House Goliath. So both these gangs will be throwing it down in a standoff scenario, just a good old-fashioned gang fight. Just to give you guys a little bit of heads up about the scenario, my friend Warlord Ace and 911, they have lost their very first game, so this is their second game going in, whereas the Pelago-Slam Kings for Brother Grimm, they've won their last game and they're looking forward for a second victory on this one. And of course, both members will be fighting it over a brand new territory to add to their dominion. So with that being said, we're going to play some background music real quick. If you want to see exactly what each of the gangs is bringing, go ahead and pause and take a look at your own leisure. So with that being said, let's get this battle report on a roll. Alright, so let's go and talk about the scenario real quick. It is a standoff scenario, and the objective is to take out as many of the enemy as possible. Now, it's based on the victory is based on a points-based system. You get 3 points for taking out your rival gang leader, you get 2 points for taking out champions, and 1 point for taking everybody else out. And of course, by the end of the scenario, whoever has the most points wins. For the rewards, the winning gang members, whoever wins earns D6 times 10 creds, while the loser earns D3 times 5 creds. For the experiences, both gangs earn +1 experience point for each fighter who is involved in the gang fight, and then of course 1 experience point for the winning gang leader. For reputation, both gangs get +1 reputation for fighting against each other for the very first time. However, if any one of these gangs bottle out, they do lose 1 reputation point, and the winner of the scenario also earns 2 reputation points for winning. And that's going to be the scenario rules for the standoff. So with the scenario rules over with, we go directly to the battle plan. As you can see, my friends are playing on a 4x4 table. On the far side of the table, my friend Warlord Ace has deployed 911, while on the near side table, my friend Brother Grimm has deployed his Pelago-Slam Kings. An interesting note about this battle report is that my friend Warlord Ace is fighting with 2 less members in his gang. In his very first scenario, his gang leader Battlle 9, as well as another one of his gang leader members, received injuries because they will not be able to participate in this one, so he's kind of fighting with a little bit of a handicap. From the general way I'm looking at it, looks like my two friends are planning on just lining up right across each other. It looks like my friend Warlord Ace is playing a little bit more defensively. He has half of his gang hiding behind that roadblock at the top of the screen, so that way he can, defend his troops. And my friend Brother Grimm is probably going to charge across the battlefield as quick as he can and try to hurt them, because that's what Goliaths do. And that pretty much makes it the battle plan on this one. So starting off with deployment for the Pelago-Slam Kings, on the far left hand side on the top of this water tower we have the Headhunter. That's a ganger's armed with a last gun as well as an axe. He's the newest member of the Pelago-Slam Kings. And the right hand side, that is Grizz. That is a gang champion armed with a heavy stubber. Making up to the center of his deployment area is a little fire team that is made up of Blitzkrieg Bob, which is on the left hand side. That is the Pelago-Slam King's leader. He's armed with a grenade launcher as well as a sword. On the left hand side, that is Fleshstick. That is his normal ganger's armed with a renderizer. And then right next to him on the right hand side, those are 2 Jubies. In the center, that's Whack-A-Mole, who's armed with a maul as well as a stub gun with dum-dum bullets, as well as Trip the Shrimp, who's also armed with a stub gun as well as dum-dum bullets as well. And that makes it the center deployment for the Pelago-Slam Kings. And on the far right hand side, making up a third fire team, are 3 gangers from the Pelago-Slam Kings. Up in the front, that is Porter, he's armed with a bolt gun. Behind him is Gage, who's armed with a stub cannon. And the right hand side, that is Rager, who's armed with a regular shotgun. And that pretty much makes the deployment for the Pelago-Slam Kings for this one. Meanwhile, across the battlefield in the center, right behind that roadblock, on the left-hand side, that is Tugs. He's armed with a last carbine. And the center, that's Soldiers. He's also armed with the last carbine as well. And the right-hand side, that is his gang champion Chopper, who's armed with a rad cannon. And that makes it the center deployment for 9/11. And on the far right hand flank inside the West Superette is the rest of the gang. Up in the front, I believe that's Mega Man. On the right hand side, that is Rundog. Those are both Juvies. Mega Man is armed with the last sub-carbine, while the Juve Rundog are with 2 last pistols. And up in the front, that is Moloko. He's a gang who's armed with a rad gun. And that makes up the deployment for the 9/11. So with both gangs deployed with, we go directly to the top of turn number 1, and my friends roll off for initiative to see who goes first. So for the action phase of turn number 1, 9/11 gets to go first, and the first thing that my friend decides to do is to activate his gang champion, that's Chopper. He aims with his rad cannon and opens directly fire across the battlefield towards where Blitzkrieg Bob is located at. Now the rad cannon does have a 5-inch blast template attack, so because that he hits every single member of the gang right in front because he managed to hit the closest target, which is the Flesh Stick, who's the ganger arm of the Renderizer. And because the blast template is so large, it covers that entire fire team. Now, the good news for this though is that the strength of the attack is only strength 2, so these guys have a pretty good chance of surviving it because Goliaths have toughness 4 as standard. However, they do have -2 AP to the attack, and because of the Rad Phage ability, which is one of the traits of this weapon, if nobody gets injured, they have to roll a d6 for each guy, and if they get a 4 up, they automatically get a flesh wound. So even though it might not, hurt them, it will definitely make them weaker throughout the battle report, making them very easy to damage, which is not very good for the Pelago-Slam Kings. Now, luckily for my friend Warlord Ace, he does manage to seriously injure Flesh Stick, so because that he's on the ground, and he also put a flesh wound onto him, he also managed to put a flesh wound onto Whack-A-Mole as well as Strip the Shrimp. Blitzkrieg Bob came off completely unscathed from that. And that makes up the opening salvos of the action phase. After realizing how powerful that weapon is, my friend Brother Grimm then activates his gang leader Blitzkrieg Bob, who then also activates Whack-A-Mole, Flesh Stick, as well as Trip the Shrimp. First of all, he sends Blitzkrieg Bob as well as Whack-A-Mole to the left-hand side, using their double movement in order to get to the area to get to some cover behind that rubble pile. And on the right-hand side, he sends Trip the Shrimp double movement over to the right-hand side to where the Alexander's department store is located at, so that way he can take some cover. Now, even though Blitzkrieg Bob as well as Whack-A-Mole are behind that rubble pile, you still can see those targets. So because that, my friend Warlord Ace will have to suffer -2 to hit against them. But because he's playing Van Saar and his champion has a 2-up ballistic skill, it still means he's still hitting him up at a 4-up. So my friend Blitzkrieg Bob realizes he's got to get his forces out of the center of the table as quickly as possible. Otherwise, they'll just get rad canned to death. Meanwhile, across the battlefield, my friend Warlord Ace then activates Moloko, his ganger arm with a rad gun. He spends a double movement growing right behind that pillar on the far right-hand side of the battlefield. Brother Grimm then activates Grizz, who then also activates the Headhunter as well. He tries to shoot with both those characters, however the Headhunter is woefully out of range even though he's carrying a last gun, so because that he will not be able to hit anything. However, Grizz does take aim with his heavy stubber, tries to open up onto Tugs and Soldiers, which are the 2 closest targets towards him, which is across the battlefield in that roadblock. Unfortunately for him though, he is suffering a -2 to hit, 1 for the distance and 2 for the fact that they're behind cover, so because of that, unfortunately for my friend Brother Grimm, he wasn't able to hit anybody during that shooting phase. So shots are not landing any blows because they're just too far away and the Van Saar behind cover. Warlord Ace then activates Mega Man and moves him up a double movement directly behind, between the West Superette as well as the Alexander's department store, looking like he's trying to flank the Pelago-Slam Kings on the right hand side. And in response, my friend Brother Grimm then activates Ranger. Ranger has him moves a double up movement towards that Hedgehog right next to Trip the Shrimp, and also starting to press his attack on the right hand flank of the battlefield as well. My friend Warlord Ace then activates Rundog, has him move up a double movement to go directly next to Mega Man, so because of that, they're both between the West Superette as well as the Alexander's department store. Once again, looks like heading on the right hand flank of the battlefield to outflank the Pelago-Slam Kings. And for the rest of the turns, my friend Brother Grimm then activates Porter as well as Gage, moving up their double movement to the right hand side along that Hedgehog as well. Now my friend Warlord Ace does try to tap both Tugs and Soldiers to open up with their last carbines against the advancing Blitzkrieg Bob as well as the Whack-A-Mole, who was in the center of the battlefield. But unfortunately for them though, they weren't able to land any hits, so because of that, nothing much really comes from it. And with the action phase over with, we go directly to the end phase. During the end phase, my friend Brother Grimm does try to make an injury roll for Flesh Stick. Unfortunately for him though, he still rolled a seriously injured roll, so because of that, Flesh Stick is still laying on the ground bleeding up. Luckily for him though, he does move Flesh Stick behind that wall during the activation action phase, make him crawl back 2 inches, so Flesh Stick won't be shot at any longer. However, he's just laying on the ground bleeding up, not doing much of anything at this point. So that pretty much makes it the end phase for turn number 1. Here's an overhead shot of the battlefield so that way you can get a good look at what's going on. As you can see, the Pelago-Slam Kings are trying to advance towards the 911, attacking from the center with Blitzkrieg Bob as well as CheapSkate and Whack-A-Mole, and at the same time advancing on the right hand flank with Rager, Porter as well as Gage. At the same time, he's also relying upon Grizz as well as the Headhunter to lay down covering fire by firing from the top of that water tower directly towards 911 in order to suppress the Saar from advancing him. At the same time, across the battlefield, Warlord Ace is taking a defensive position using Tugs, Soldiers, as well as Chopper right behind that roadblock in the center of the screen, the top of the screen. So that way they're behind that little fortified fighting structure to lay down suppressive fire across the center of the battlefield. At the same time, he's also flanking the right-hand side with Runedog, Mega Man, as well as Moloko to intercept the gangers coming for the Pelago-Slam Kings to attack him. So it looks like a traditional kind of fix and flank type of fighting situation between these typical gangs. So with the end of turn number 1 over with, we go directly to the top of turn number 2, and my friends roll off for initiative to see who goes first. And unfortunately for my friend Brother Grimm, Warlord Ace managed to get managed to get the initiative again, and he opens up the rad cannon one more time, taking aim directly at Whack-A-Mole. Whack-A-Mole is the closest enemy target towards him, and like I said before, because it has such a large blast radius, because the rad cannon generates a 5-inch blast template, he also managed to hit Blitzkrieg Bob as well. Now like I said, it's only a strength 2 weapon, however, because Whack-A-Mole has suffered a flesh wound, he has 1 less point in toughness, makes him a little bit easier to wound. Unfortunately for my friend Warlord Ace, he wasn't able to cause any injuries onto those 2 fighters. He does put a flesh wound onto Blitzkrieg Bob as well as Whack-A-Mole, so now Whack-A-Mole is carrying 2 additional flesh wounds. However, because he activated Chopper, Chopper then also activated Soldiers, which is one of the gangers who was armed with a last carbine. He takes aim at the line of sight towards CheapSkate and manages to hit him as well and causes him a serious injury, so right now he's laying on the ground kind of bleeding out at this point. Fearful for the fact that his troops are getting attacked, my friend Brother Grimm does activate Blitzkrieg Bob, who then also activates Whack-A-Mole. He moves them up their normal movement allowance so that way they can both move as well as shoot. Now he does take aim with Blitzkrieg Bob and has it open up with a cat grenade from his grenade launcher. Unfortunately for him though, he wasn't able to land any successful hits. However, because Whack-A-Mole is armed with a dum-dum bullets inside of his stub gun, he does aim and takes a shot directly into 911, and he managed to hit Soldiers with it. Unfortunately for Brother Grimm though, he only managed to cause a flesh wound onto Soldiers, so because of that, Soldiers still on the ground, he's still fighting. Now granted, he is a little bit easier to wound against because now his toughness is dropped to 2, but he's still a very dangerous member. He's got really good ballistic skill, and he's also armed with a rapid fire last carbine, so the 911 is definitely not out of the fight yet. In response, my friend Warlord Ace then moves up, the Juvie Runedog, who's armed with twin last pistols. He moves him up his normal movement allowance so that way he can open up with both pistols against, Porter, which is the gang on the left-hand side, who's armed with a bolt gun. Now, granted, he is a Juvie, but the Juvies within the advanced Saar have a ballistic skill, I think, of 4, so he's actually doing pretty good, which means he has to roll like a 5 up to hit him with 2 different shots, so the shots are doable, but unfortunately for him, though, my friend Warlord Ace was unable to land any successful shots against him. In response, Brother Grimm then moves up Porter, just moves up his normal movement allowance and has him take aim with his bolt gun, and he opens up with rapid fire against the Juvie Runedog. He misses with his first shot, but the second shot does manage to hit the Juvie's dead center of mass and also manages to put him out of action as well. So as you can see on the injury roll, it rolls up for the skull. So because of that, Runedog will no longer take place the rest of the scenario, and he will need to roll up on the serious injury table at the end of it to see exactly what happens to him. Warlord Ace then activates Mega Man, having him move up his normal movement allowance and open fire with his last sub-carbine, which is a rapid fire last pistol. But unfortunately for him though, he wasn't able to cause any damage against Porter as well. If I remember correctly, I don't even think he managed to hit him as well, so because of that, Porter is completely fine. And to make matters worse, Brother Grimm then activates Gage, who moves him up his normal movement allowance and also has him open up with his stub cannon. Now luckily for my friend Warlord Ace, the stub cannon shot went wide, was unable to hit Mega Man, so because of that there was no injuries or any hits whatsoever. And in response, my friend Warlord Ace then activates Moloko, who's armed with a rad gun. And a rad gun is basically a radiation flamer, for lack of a better word, and he takes a critical aim towards Porter and actually opens up with it. Now, to make matters worse, when he opens up with his rad gun, not only does he manage to capture the template onto Porter, but he also managed to hit Gage as well. So because of that, both those gangers are being, swept over with a flame of radiation fire directly from the rad gun. Now, just like the rad cannon, it only is strength 2. However, it does have -2 AP, so these guys will not be able to get armor rolls. And it also, as always with the rad phage ability, if he rolls a 4 up on a d6 for both these fighters, they both will get flesh wounds as well. So things are not looking very good for my friend Brother Grimm. And not only does he manage to put flesh wounds onto both those fighters, but he also managed to put a serious injury onto Porter. So because that Porter is now on the ground bleeding out, which is kind of a precarious situation for him, because if any other members of the Van Saar charge directly into him, they can quickly finish him off with a coup de grace, put him into out of action. So things are looking very grim for my friend Brother Grimm at this point. So, trying to desperately save the 2 members of Porter and Gage, my friend Brother Grimm then activates Rager. Rager moves up his normal movement allowance with his shotgun. He tries to open up with a solid slug shot against Mega Man, because Mega Man is the closest target by just a ½ inch. Unfortunately for my friend Brother Grimm, though, when he rolled the hit dice, he rolled a 1, so because of that, nothing really happens here on the right-hand side. And because my friend Warlord Ace doesn't have any more gang members, the rest of the turn is dedicated to the Goliaths. He does try to take aim with Grizz once again. He actually opens fire with his heavy stubber across the battlefield. Does manage to hit, I believe Chopper managed to hit the gang champion's arm with a rad cannon. So that part's pretty interesting. And he also makes the Headhunter do a double movement, moving down from the water tower to the ground, so that way he can start pressing the attack as well. And like I said before, he does manage to hit Chopper as well as seriously injure him. So because that, Chopper is now laying face down on the ground, bleeding out because he has been hit with a heavy stubber at this point. And that pretty much makes it the action round on this one. So with the action phase over with, we go directly to the end phase. So starting with the Pelago-Slam Kings, unfortunately for Brother Grimm, and he rolls for the injury roll for Flesh Stick, he still rolls a serious injury. So because that Flesh Stick is still on the ground, just bleeding out, not doing much of anything at this point. The exact same thing also happens to Trip the Shrimp, who's still laying on the ground bleeding. And the exact same thing happens to Porter as well, who's just laying on the ground just trying to recover at this point. And luckily for my friend Warlord Ace, Chopper does manage to get back onto his feet again. He is carrying a flesh wound, so he will be easier to wound this time, but that's the risk my friend Warlord Ace is willing to take in order to keep the fight going. So with the end of round number 2 over with, we go directly to the overhead shots. That way you can see exactly what's going on for the battlefield. As you can see, the Pelago-Slam Kings are still trying to press the advance across the battlefield, trying to get towards 9/11. Blitzkrieg Bob as well as Whack-A-Mole are trying to advance the cover across the battlefield, trying to use cover to make sure they don't get shot at, so that way they can start dealing with those members of the gang. At the same time, my friend Brother Grimm is also maneuvering his forces on the right-hand flank to try to outflank the Van Saar. At the same time, they're being stopped by the Juvie Mega Man as well as Moloko, the gang who's armed with a rad gun. And that pretty much makes up the end of turn number 2 for that one. So that being said, we go directly to the top of turn number 3 for my friends, and they roll off for initiative to see who goes first. And the Pelago-Slam Kings managed to get the initiative on this one. So the first thing that my friend decides to do is declare a charge with with Gage. He tries to charge him directly into the Juve Mega Man. So he does declare his charge to do that, but as he charges across the battlefield, my friend Warlord Ace then activates him, activates Mega Man, has to do Overwatch, opening up the last carbine, manages to hit him 3 times with the rapid fire ability with the last sub carbine, manages to put a serious injury onto Gage. So because of that, Gage is laying face down right next to Porter. And to make matters worse, my friend then activates Moloko, who then moves up a couple inches forward and then cuts loose with his rad gun directly into Gage as well as Porter, covering them both in radioactive fire. Now, luckily for my friend Brother Grimm, both those guys do manage to survive being hit by the radiation. However, due to the rad phage special rules, both have been reduced by another flesh wound. So because of that, the toughness characteristics of these 2 guys have now been dropped down to 2, which means they're extremely easy to wound against now. So then in Restrained, my friend then tries to decide to activate Rager by charging him directly into Moloko and engage him in close combat. In response, my friend decides to activate Moloko again, have him cut loose with his rad gun, and not only does he manage to cause a flesh wound under Rager, but he also manages to put him down as well. So as you can see here, when he caused the injuries for him, he caused a flesh wound for him automatically with the rad gun, and he also managed to put a serious injury on him. So because of that, the entirety of the right-hand flank for the Pelago-Slam Kings is now on the ground bleeding. And this is a really bad situation for my friend Brother Grimm, because if he decides, my friend Warlord Ace decides to activate these 2 characters, because if he activates Mega Man can then charge forward and then put a coup de grace on one of these guys and take him directly out of action. Meanwhile, in the center of the battlefield, my friend Warlord Ace then activates Chopper, who then in turn also activates Tugs as well. Tugs takes aim with, Tugs. Tugs takes aim with his last carbine, opens up onto Whack-A-Mole. Not only does he manage to hit him, I think he hit him 3 times with the rapid fire dice of the last carbine. Not only does he manage to hit him, I think he wounded him once and caused a out of action roll on that one as well. So because that Mega Man will need to roll up on the serious injury table at the end of the scenario to see exactly what happens to him. So with Whack-A-Mole out of the picture, the closest enemy target towards his main fire line is Blitzkrieg Bob. So because that Chopper does take aim with his rad cannon and manages to hit Blitzkrieg Bob's center of mass with his rad cannon, causing a huge explosion of radioactive fire to erupt inside the Underhive. He was not able to cause any damage onto Blitzkrieg Bob, but he did manage to put in a flesh wound on him, so because of that he's a little bit weaker now and easier to wound against because he's losing points in his toughness. Brother Grimm then activates Blitzkrieg Bob, moves him up his normal movement allowance right behind the ambulance, so that way he has a good line of sight towards that firing position at the roadblock. He has him take aim with his grenade launcher using crack grenade shots, so that way he can hit him as well. And he actually does manage to hit Soljas, I believe is the name of the ganger, who gets hit across the battlefield. So Soljas take a crack grenade right straight to his chest, but because he was unable to cause a wound when he rolled for the wound roll, my friend Brother Grimm rolled a 1. So because of that, he doesn't cause any injuries. All he does is he manages to pin the guy because he managed to get hit by a grenade that didn't detonate. To make matters worse, on the left-hand side, my friend Warlord Ace then activates Mega Man, who then charges directly into Porter and manages to put him out of action with a coup de grace. And he does exactly the same thing with Mologo, charging directly into Rager and putting a coup de grace on him as well and taking him out of action. Meanwhile, across the battlefield, my friend then activates his gang champion Grizz, who tries to open up the heavy bolter, heavy stub gun directly onto both Moloko, because when Moloko came around the corner to charge the Rager, he actually opened himself to a field of fire. Unfortunately for my friend Brother Grimm, Grizz does miss all of his shots, so because of that, nothing much happens. He also does exactly the same thing with the Headhunter, moving up his normal movement allowance, having him take a shot with his last gun. But unfortunately for him too, he managed to miss as well, not causing any damage to the Moloko. So Moloko is extremely lucky because he just survived 2 shots from Goliath and managed to survive. And with his final activation, my friend Warlord Ace then activates Soljas, who gets back on his feet and pops a shot with his last carbine against Blitzkrieg Bob. And due to Blitzkrieg Bob's weakened state from Radphage, he actually suffers a wound from that part, so that part was kind of neat as well. However, Blitzkrieg Bob does carry 2 wounds on him, so because of that, he is about halfway towards making an injury roll, and that pretty much makes it the action round for this one. So with the action round, we go directly to the end phase. And unfortunately, my friend Brother Grimm has to take a Battlle test, which he fails, as you can see by the little misfire icon next to Blitzkrieg Bob. So because of that, on the beginning of the next turn, each of his gang members will need to roll a cool check to see if they stand their ground and continue fighting. These guys are Goliaths, so they have no problem. They have really good cool characteristics, so because of that, they're not really going to be breaking anytime soon. However, before his recovery test, Fleshstick is still on the ground bleeding out because he is still seriously injured, and he's been that way for the majority of the battle. However, Trip the Shrimp does manage to get back on his feet again with another flesh wound, so because of that, he is significantly easier to wound. But however, Gage is still on the ground, bleeding out on the ground, and he is now outnumbered by 2 members of 9/11 as well. And that pretty much makes it the end phase for turn number 3. So with most of his gang out of action, my friend decides to call the game at this point. Brother Grimm decides to concede the victory towards my other friend Warlord Ace, so because of that, 9/11 does manage to win the scenario on this one. So with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to go directly to the post-game because this battle report is now officially over. Alright, so we start off with the Pelago-Slam Kings. For the injuries, they had 3 members of the gang that went out of action. That was Porter, Rager, as well as Whack-A-Mole. Porter and Rager both rolled out cold results because they make full recoveries. However, Whack-A-Mole rolls a hand injury. He does go into recovery, and he also suffers 1 to his weapon skill as well. For advancements, my friend Brother Grimm decides to spend his advancement experience points for Whack-A-Mole, making him level 2, earning him +1 to his willpower. Now for the territory, he doesn't earn any new territories on this one. He doesn't lose any territory as well. However, at the Merchant, he earned 15 credits from the scenario. He also managed to earn 60 credits from his settlement as well. He purchased a bolt gun for Gage as well as a stub gun for Porter. He also purchased a last gun for Whack-A-Mole now because he realizes that that guy will not be able to do really well in close combat, so he looks like he's kitting him out to be more of a long-range shooter. And he takes Gage's stub cannon and places that into the stash as well. For the reputation, they do earn 1 point reputation for fighting against 9/11 for the very first time. However, they lose that point of reputation for bottling out. At the same time, they also earn 1 point of reputation from their settlement, netting their grand total for the reputation points to 7. Their new record now is at 1 win and 1 loss, and their new gang rating now is at 1,140 points. And finally for 9/11, for injuries, Runedog was the only gang member that got injured. He rolled an out cold result, so because it makes a full recovery. For advancements, he decides not to make any advancements at this time. And for his territories, he earned a corpse farm, which is actually an interesting kind of territory piece. What ends up happening for a corpse farm is that by the end of the scenario, if anybody dies on either side, my friend Warlord Ace gets D6 times 10 credits for every single dead person that ends up happening. And how a corpse farm works is that what they do is they take the bodies, they dump at this farm that's then grounded down to paste and used to feed people, which is used to feed the poor, which is pretty bad. Also, the territory, he does roll 2d6 for his settlement, managed to roll 1/6. Because of that, he recruited a brand new juvie from the settlement, and he names that juvie FNG. At the merchant, he earns 40 credits from the scenario, as well as 50 credits from his settlement. He purchased flak armor for Chopper, Moloko, Tugs, Soldier, Tough Shakes, Mega Man, Runedog, as well as FNG, and with the remaining 10 credits, he purchased twin last pistols for FNG. For his reputation, he earns 2 reputation points for winning the scenario, as well as 1 reputation point from fighting against the Pelago-Slam Kings for the very first time. He also earns 1 point reputation from his settlement, bringing 9/11's total reputation total to 7 points. His new record now is at 1 win and 1 loss, and his new gang rating is at 1,115 points. So that's good to do for this one, you guys. As always, please feel free to like, comment, and or subscribe. Your guys' input is invaluable to us as always. Also check us out on Facebook, Instagram, as well as blogger.com for all the latest and greatest news about the hobby aspect of our channel. That's good to do for this one, you guys. You guys stay classy. We'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace out.